So we're closing this Samson series out today, and this has been a fun series for me. Several of you have commented you learn more about Samson than you ever thought was in there, and that's always the thing, is no matter how many times I read stories from the Bible, if you go back and you give yourself a chance to really read it through, meditate on it, you're going to find some things. God's going to show you some things that you never even knew were in there. So for most of us, we came to Samson with this kind of, let's just say, kind of a more of a nursery school understanding of Samson. That's not bad. It's just saying that most of us come in with this understanding that he's a strong guy. In fact, if you've seen the movie posters that were out for the movie that was in the theaters that I totally missed because I don't know why, but Samson was out, you see what? You see this poster of a guy standing between two pillars, just totally bulked up, not looking like me, shirt off, hair long. And I mean, this is a good looking guy, and he's standing there and he's pushing these pillars over. And that's really, for most of us, what our understanding of Samson has been. He's just this strong guy. What we've discovered is he was a weak man. That in the strength that he carried, that God gifted him with, this supernatural kind of power that he had, his faith was really weak. He was not a great leader. He broke his vows to God all the time. He was a man who, even though he was strong, lived a pretty tragic life. So it's interesting. Yesterday, I'm sitting at my niece's graduation, and I'm getting all of the standard graduation stuff that goes with that, including the speeches and just the hopefulness. And it's always fun to sit in those spaces, right? Because there's so much hope. There's so much excitement. And of course, the valedictorian and the salutatorian are have all these little inside jokes that they keep popping, and they're talking about their classmates, and they're talking about who got voted what, or what you might expect out of some of their classmates. And I just sat there yesterday. I thought to myself, as I was thinking about Samson, my mind drifted a little. I was thinking to myself, Samson was probably the guy that if he'd gone to your high school, you would have voted Samson one of the guys who might be most likely to succeed. Like whatever Samson's going to do, he's going to touch it. It's going to become gold in his hands because he's a big guy. He's strong. He's good looking. And in our world, that accounts for a lot, right? We judge almost everything from these outward appearances. And the thing is, his life, at the end of the life, it's really tragic. And you can't use Samson as this guy that you model your faith after. It just doesn't work. But he's in there for a reason, and we finally this morning get to that part that everybody's probably been waiting on, the Delilah section. Like you all knew that Delilah had to come up at some point. So we're going to touch on that really, really quickly and find out that Samson, even though in his classmates they might have thought he would succeed, he did not succeed most of the time. So Delilah, she's the lady that most of us know when we think about Samson. She's the person that most of us associate as being a prostitute, somebody that he got involved with that eventually was his downfall. Here's the thing. Before we ever get to Delilah, we already have a taste of Samson. We have a taste of kind of his life, how he's going to walk it out, and some of the things that are going to get him in trouble. And if you remember, if you've been with us at all in the series, we keep trying to reference it, that Samson, at the very early onset of his adult male life, he already shows us who he is. He already shows us that he's really going to start breaking his vows, that he's going to not pay attention to the things that God has for him. And so what does he do? He goes to his dad because he finds this Philistine woman who's very attractive, and he wants to marry this woman. Now, from his covenant perspective, from his being associated with the children of God, right? The family of God, he's not supposed to marry this woman. And I need to remind you this because I got to say it all the time. It has nothing to do with her ethnicity. It's not a bigoted issue. It's an issue that she lives, comes, supports, believes in a life view, a world view that's completely opposing to God. And God is trying to keep his people to himself. He's trying to show the world what it's like to walk with him, to live with him. So Samson is not supposed to affiliate with her of all people. Again, not because of her from an ethnic background, but because of her and her stance with God, because of who she was. But Samson sees her, and she must have been really attractive, and is like most men in their early days when we obviously were living exactly like we're supposed to, we allowed our eyes sometimes to get us in trouble. And Samson goes to his dad in Judges 14, and he says, God, get her for me. He's pretty adamant. He's, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. Get her for me. I'm done. I've seen her. I've seen all I need to see. I don't care that everything about her life, her walk, her belief system, her family of origin, everything in her world opposes being a part of the family of God. And Samson says, I still want her in spite of all of that. See, here's the thing. We forget this. God invites every one of us to live our lives, to make decisions as we walk out every day. I remember a couple of years ago, we were on vacation before my daughter got married, and she got really offended with her dad. Of course, that's not hard to do. In my house, I say things that offend a lot of people sometimes. But I made this statement, and I was willing to stand for it and argue it through with her. And it's to her, it sounded like I was downplaying my relationship to her mother. I just let her know that I did not believe in soulmates. Right? I didn't believe that God just had one person out there for you to marry. And in part, I don't believe that, because all it takes is for one of us men to mess up, and men, we are prone to messing up. All it takes is for one of us to marry the wrong girl, and then what? It's like dominoes. They all of a sudden, we're all marrying the wrong person, right? So I finally convinced her and backed her down that I did love her mother. Our marriage was fine. We were going to make it through. But here's the thing. Samson steps up. He says, I want what's right in my eyes. When God was inviting him to see something, maybe he did want to be with her. Maybe he did find her attractive, but he didn't submit his decisions to God. He didn't line himself up with the covenant that he had made. And he got in trouble. He allowed his eyes to decide what he should do. He allowed his desires to decide what he should do. And here's what happens when that happens. We call that lust. We call that lust. And I know in our culture, that tends to be a word that's associated only with sexual things, but it's not. Even from a biblical perspective, the word lust simply means strong desire. Now it is associated a lot of times in the Bible with sexuality, but it doesn't matter. The word lust simply means strong desire, so it's got much broader meaning. But Samson, in this scenario, he says, I want her, get her for me. She's right in my eyes. His lust took over. And God's inviting us to make decisions based on not what we lust after, but what he's instructed us in his truth. But in our world, here's what happens. It's already on the screen. Look at this. Lust says, I see it, I want it, I can't change that. That's lust. That's strong desire. I see it, I want it, and I can't change that. But what God is wanting from us is surrender. Right? Because that's a version of surrender, is it not? That if you see something and you want it, there's nothing wrong with that. But the attitude of I can't change it is an attitude of surrender. I'm giving into this. Whatever it is, no matter what God has said, I'm giving into it because I can't change who I am. I can't change that core drive, that core desire. That's a problem in the scriptures. That's the thing we've been looking at. And we're gonna get, if you'll permit me this morning, we're gonna touch on some things. And again, just brutally honest, right? A moment of honesty up here. Like, I really like that you like me sometimes. I really want you to love me a lot of times. But the problem is sometimes I need to say things that even I don't like. And today I'm going to say some of those things. So stay with me. Because lust says, I see it, I want it, I can't change that. But God's inviting us into a different worldview, into a different way of looking at things. What he wanted from Samson was he wanted Samson to see it. He wanted him to admire it, to be okay with wanting it. But he wanted Samson to consider his ways first, and he didn't. Would God be pleased? That's all Samson had to ask. Would God be pleased? It was a simple invitation. There's a freedom and a dilemma in this for us this morning. Let's talk about the freedom for a second. The freedom is this. There's absolutely no judgment in this message this morning. There's no judgment in the life of Samson. There's no judgment. When you get into the scriptures and you start to read this and you see how many people, their lives are just a wreck, and yet God tells the story, and in the end, what happens? He redeems their life. There is no judgment in this story. This morning, everybody walked in this room with a messy life. Some messier than others, but all messy. And so there is no judgment this morning. Your life matters. Your story matters to God. And that's the exciting part, right? But here's the dilemma. We think a lot of times that we have to clean up first. We think that we have to look good before we come to this point. We think that before we can even walk before God, that we need to fix ourselves. And so many of us this morning, we come and we don't want to deal with the lust, the strong desires, the things that will consume us. Because why? Because we've got to fix those things in order to look good in front of God and His people, right? And that creates a problem. We live in a culture that says what? Work hard, do good things, and life will be okay. It'll all work out. And that's just not true. But we all work to that end, right? So maybe not everybody in here struggles with lusting after a person of the opposite sex. Maybe nobody struggles in here this morning with this idea of lust in a sexual manner. Maybe that's just not you. But we all struggle. You ready? This is where it gets tough. We all struggle. Let's start with social media. It's a light topic. Everybody's blood will go through the roof in a second. You know that 54% of our culture is now addicted to social media. These are the latest statistics I could find. It's amazing. Computer Magazine, or Computer World Magazine, said this: Americans are so fixated on social networks, they spend an average of 16 minutes out of every hour on them. Go to graduation, you're going to spend more than that. Okay, but we're just going to call that an anomaly. All right, it is what it is. I didn't know 99% of those people. But think about it, how much you look at that phone, at that social media network. How much that almost to the point that it becomes a desire, to the point, like I just have to do it. Like I literally on my days off will put my phone away, ask my wife, I'll put it away because I'll reach for it at times when I don't even need it. We have this desire, and it's consuming some of us. All right, let's go a little bit further. How about shopping? Anybody here like to shop? And it gets tough, right? Look, I love this statistic because it's sobering to me. I like things that sober me up. In 2017, the credit card debt in our country went up another 7% to $931 billion. That's an average of $16,000 per person. Now, I know that's a lot of money, but I also know that $16,000 per person is not real. That there's some people who don't carry any credit card debt, and there's some that carry 10 times that amount because of what they can carry. I love Costco. I love Walmart. I'm with you, but how many times have you ever walked into a place like Costco and walked out and think, where did I just drop $100? I mean, like, I've got 3 things right here. And it's okay, right? It's okay to want things, and it's okay to conveniently find things, but is it consuming your world? Right? Is it such a strong desire that you don't even think about God in the middle of those purchases? See, that's what we're digging into this morning. How about this? Eating. 70.7. And I put the 0.7 because I was just shocked at the numbers. In our country now, but this was back from 2013-14, those were the latest stats I could find, are considered overweight or obese. We love to eat. And man, I love to eat things that aren't good for me. It's just the way I'm wired, I guess. Let's take it one step further. How about porn? The newest stats will scare you. 3 out of 4 men are addicted to pornography. 3 out of 4. And that includes in this room. So there's no judgment today, but these are hard things we're not dealing with, right, church? 50% of young women now find it acceptable to use pornography as an expression of their sexuality. 50%. You understand what we're saying here? We would, at one time, even 10 years ago, would have said, oh, this is just a thing that guys deal with. But now we're saying it's not just a guy thing. It's the whole culture. 30%, 1 out of 3 women are addicted to porn. 30%. How about alcohol? This is a tough one because we don't teach on this a lot at Journey, right? Some of you kind of have found a new freedom here. right? You know me. I don't like to say things the Bible doesn't say. And there are people out there in the Christian world that for years have said you should never have a glass of beer or a drink of any kind. And see, the problem with that is the Bible. It just doesn't say that. But the reality is the Bible does give us some standards. And for many of us, we ignore the standards. Paul tells the Ephesian church, that young church, he says, look, don't get drunk. Here's the standards. Just don't get drunk. And yet, how many times do we push past that? Lust is our problem. It is a problem. That strong desire that drives us to do things, it's not that the desire is bad. It's just that here's what we do. We say the same thing that the culture says all the time. I see it, I want it, and I can't change that. I see it, I want it, I can't change it. I see it, I want it, I can't change it, so I'm going to go get it. And we allow those strong desires to control our lives, right? So this is not a message, you need to hear me this morning. This is not a message about what we should not be doing. This is not about, I'm going to create some kind of list and tell you the things you shouldn't do in your life, and then you're going to feel judged and feel guilty. This is not a message about you feeling guilty. This is a message that we all struggle with. We all have desires. We all have areas. And so when we come here in this room, when we come together as a church, the greatest thing we get to celebrate together is that we're all on equal footing. That we all have something in us that's opposite of the plan of God. We all have something in us, driving us, working in us at times, that's opposite of what God wants from us. We're just like Samson. And it's nothing to celebrate in the sense of giving it a higher place of honor than it should have, but it's something to celebrate at this level that we come together. We don't have to judge each other. We don't have to stop telling everybody else what to stop doing. We come here and we celebrate a God who accepts us just as we are. And then we have to ask, where do we go from here? I want to take you to Judges 16. Let's look at this story real quick. There's a lot of verses this morning, but I didn't want to cut any of these out. I wanted you to see them. So Judges 16, we'll start with the story of Delilah. One day Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza, and he spent the night with a prostitute. The Gazites were told, Samson has come here. And they surrounded the place and set an ambush for him all night at the gate of the city. They kept quiet all night, saying, let us wait till the morning, till the light of the morning, and then we're going to kill him. But Samson lay till midnight, and at midnight he rose and he took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts. And he pulled up, bar and all, and he put them on his shoulders, and he carried them to the top of the hill that's in front of Hebron. Now, I put this section in here. This is right before he encounters Delilah, but I want you to understand what's going on, because this is one of those, you read this and you go, huh? There's a lot of huh things in here. First, let's talk about this. It says he went and he visited with this prostitute. There is some speculation that Samson did not go there to sleep with this prostitute. Now, the text is not 100% clear. We aren't very sure. But there is in Joshua 2, when you read, when Joshua is sending the spies into the land, there are a couple of spies and they go into the land and they actually are hidden in the dwelling, the living space of a prostitute at the time. So there is some precedence that maybe he was there because it was a place for him to hide out. It was just a place where nobody was going to be looking for him at the time. I don't know, but can I tell you something? Can I tell you my inclination? After 5 weeks with Samson, it seems like he doesn't deny himself a whole lot. So I'm thinking if he went to the prostitute, he probably didn't go to sleep there very long. Second, there's a reason that he does this weird thing with the city gate, right? If you read that, you just go, what? He did what? He lifted the city gate and he carried it up the hill. Like what is going on here? Everybody reading this from the people of God would have understood this in light of when God was talking to Abraham. So I'm going to take you to Genesis 22 real quick. Abraham has just offered his son Isaac up for sacrifice. Okay, if you don't know the whole story, we'll get there one day, but go read it. Of course, he doesn't sacrifice his son. God provides an acceptable sacrifice. And then God starts talking to Abraham, and he's giving him instructions about how he's going to live together with the people with the tribe of Abraham and what the children of Israel are supposed to do to obey God. So here's what he says. God says to Abraham, I will surely bless you. I will surely multiply your offsprings as the stars of the heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemy. See, it means something that Samson picked that gate up. And it wasn't just, oh, I'm going to show everybody how strong I am. First of all, he did have to be strong, because city gates, if you don't understand how they built cities back then, they tried to find places to build into the sides of mountains so that there was a valley or some one way into the city. And they would put a gate that could block the only path, and it was a heavy gate, and it was their protection from roaming bands of tribes, people that would want to take over. So when Samson lifted that gate up, it was more than just Samson taking their city gate. It reflected back to God being faithful. That God, in the middle of Samson's mess, in the middle of everything he keeps messing up, God is being faithful to what he had told Abraham all the way back in Genesis 22. Right? So the city is now left unprotected. Judges 16, let's keep going, verse 4. And sometime later, I don't know, a couple of days, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah. You often don't fall in love unless you have visited the woman several times, I'm just saying, who lived in the valley of Sorek. We don't know a lot about Delilah. We really don't. In fact, you want to know the craziest thing is in the Old Testament writings especially, if a woman is identified, she's typically identified with a man. She's identified with her dad, her brothers, her husband. Ladies, it's the way it was back then. We don't do it anymore, right? I'm all about you keep your name if you want, whatever. But here's the deal. They didn't do it back then. So to identify a woman with no man means something was up. Her name, Delilah. It was a Hebrew name, even though we're not really sure she was Hebrew. In fact, we know that she associated with the Philistines more than the Hebrews, if nothing else. But her name, Delilah, is a word play on the word night. Samson's name is a word play in Hebrew on the word for sun. So we're very quickly having this epiphany that the night is trying to overcome the sun. The darkness is trying to overcome the light. It's rich in imagery. We're never told she's a prostitute, but we're also not told that she isn't, and it sure looks like that's what's going on. Verse 5, the rulers of the Philistines went to her, and they said, entice Samson to tell you what makes him so strong, how he can be overpowered and tied up securely. If you do that, then each of us is going to give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Think about that, what that would mean for a single woman in that culture. We don't know how many leaders there are, but they were all willing, and I'm guessing there were numbers of them. They were all willing to surrender 1,100 pieces of silver. It was a substantial haul on her part. Verse 6. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me what makes you strong and what it would take to tie you up securely. Now, gentlemen, this is how you know that he's in trouble, right? Now, I get it. She's got to be pretty. She is probably wearing something that's just, he is not focused. Because when she says to him, who is behind enemy lines, he's with the people who are not, they're not nice to his people, right? He's behind those enemy lines, and she says, say, just topic of conversation. How is it I could tie you up and take your strength away? And what does he do? He lasts for a while, but eventually he gives in. Eventually he surrenders the information. Eventually he tells her that last piece of his vow, the cutting of his hair, would be the thing that would do it. And so what does he do? When he's asleep one night, she cuts his hair. And they're able to come in and bind him and take him away, and he gets thrown into prison. Eventually, they gouge his eyes out so he's blind. And he's this pathetic excuse of a man. This leader of the house of God is now in prison himself. He's broken. He's busted. Verse 23, we're going to skip a little bit. Now the lords of the Philistines gathered. They were going to offer this great sacrifice to Dagon, their god. Watch what they say here. Watch what they're saying about Dagon. Our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hand. And when the people saw him, they praised their God. For they said, our God has given our enemy into our hands, and the ravager of our country who has killed many of us. You notice how part of what they say is true? Right? Has Samson been killing some of their people? Has Samson been ravaging parts of their country? Remember when he burned their crops? Took away their livelihood? Part of what they're saying is true. Isn't it funny how they're in the circumstances from both sides, it's the same circumstance, but notice how they interpret it. That from their perspective, their circumstance says that they have had victory. Their God is better than the holy God. They have this perspective because they're interpreting their circumstances through their personal experiences. This is the danger we all run into, right? That if you simply interpret your circumstances based on your personal experiences without the proclaimed expression of the Bible, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get in trouble when you interpret all of your life simply through your personal experiences without the truth of the Scriptures. And that's what happens. They think they're in the right simply because they were able to tie him up. Verse 25. When their hearts were merry, that means they were drinking a lot. They said, call Samson, that he may entertain us. He must have still had some power. Either that or they just wanted him to dance around the fire. I don't know. So they called Samson out of the prison. And when he entered them, they made him stand between the pillars. And Samson said to the young man who held him with the hand, the guy who led him out, he says, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests. Not any pillar. I want to feel the pillars that literally this house is stabilized on, that I may lean against them. It makes sense. If these are the main pillars of the house, if you have a load-bearing wall in your house, what's that wall going to do? It's going to hold things up. It's a sturdy wall. Let me feel the pillars that are the strongest. I want to lean up against those pillars. Now the house was full of men and women, and the lords of the Philistines were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women. This is not just a standard home, right? Nobody can put 3,000 people. Don't even put anybody on your house, okay? Not on your roof. But they've got 3,000 men and women up on the roof, and they're having this giant party, and they're all able to look down and see what's going on. And verse 28, then Samson called to the Lord and said, "O Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me only this once." Notice the shift in the heart. Notice the shift in the attitude. Notice the humility. He realizes all of a sudden, my strength came from outside of me. Strengthen me one more time, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson grasped the two middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. See, it's no longer about Samson being glorified. It's no longer about Samson's desires for life being fulfilled. It's let me go ahead and die now too. Then he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life. At the end of the whole thing, desires were probably still there. Samson wanted to live. I don't think he necessarily set out to die that night, but the heart changed. And he knew that he was a spectacle, and he knew he had messed up, and he knew he wasn't leading the people of God like he was supposed to. And so he asked God one more time, God, just give me the strength to do what I know I was supposed to do anyway, and that's to lead them out, to release the children of God from the oppressive hand and rulership of the Philistines. But it didn't have to be that way. And that's the message for me. That's the message as I read this, I hope we pull away, is that it doesn't have to be this way. Yes, God used it. Yes, it worked out. But Samson didn't have to lose his life that way. Samson didn't have to live his life the way he lived. There's an opportunity to break free, and we see it. I love Paul, in the New Testament, Paul, this guy that was so opposed to Christians, so opposed to Christianity, so opposed to Jesus, that when he finally met the living Savior and his life was so changed, everything about his demeanor changed and his perspective sharpened. And when he wrote to the Corinthians about this idea of lust and desire and how to live your life, watch what he says in 1 Corinthians 10:13. He says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man." What do we say? No judgment. No judgment. Yeah, somebody else's, their temptation is not your temptation. Yes, it's different than yours. Yes, you don't understand it. Yes, to you it seems gross. It seems icky. But it is not uncommon to mankind. All temptation has existed since the creation of the world and the fall. Look what he says, but God is faithful, and he's not going to let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide a way of escape. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say he's going to provide an easy escape. He doesn't say he's going to get rid of the temptation all the time. He doesn't say he's going to take care of the desire so you'll never have it again. He says when the desire comes on you, when you see it, you decide that you would like it, he's going to give you a way to get away from it. See, sometimes I think we wait. We wait for that. If I could just, God, if you just help me to lose that desire. We don't like that. We want some magical thing to happen so we just lose the desire. Paul says that's not how it works. God will give you a way out. Look at the last part of the verse, that you may be able to endure it. You can get through it. You don't have to give in to it. But why not just get rid of the struggles? Why can't God just get rid of it? If God's God, why can't he just get rid of my struggles? I think Paul answers that in 1 Thessalonians 4, in another section where he's writing. He wrote so much about this to the churches as they were growing. And in verse 3 he says, "For this is the will of God, your sanctification." Now that's a big word, but you can go look it up. All it simply means is to be made like God. To become like God. Your sanctification, to more and more have yourself transformed into the qualities, the characters, the traits that reflect God. Paul says, this is the will of God, your sanctification. And then look where he takes it. He begins to talk about sexuality for just a second. He says, that you abstain from sexual immorality, that each one of you knows how to control his body in holiness and honor, not in passion and lust like the Gentiles who do not know God. He said, here's the thing. God, really, it's about you becoming sanctified, more like God. Now, let's talk about sexuality. It's not about him taking the desires away. It's about you being able to control, you, through the power of the Holy Spirit, walking in a way that honors God. We don't like that. But we say we do, and we see the difference. But listen, we challenge that all the time, right? We love to live a life full of lust, full of drive, full of desire. That's part of our culture. And Paul says, no, I want you to live, understand that God wants you to live in a way that honors him, that more and more you're becoming like him. So, listen, when you get out on a date, if you're single, and you're out parking, I don't know, do you still park these days? There's nowhere to park in the city of Allen, right? There's just no country roads left, almost. And you're out there, and it's getting hot and heavy, and you understand what that means, right? I could say the word horny, but I won't say it in here because it'll be on audio, and then somebody will get mad at me. When you get that wound up, the ethic is what? No sex. That's what he says. It's not belittling you. It's not degrading your desires. It's not saying God doesn't want you to have any fun. He says, I'm trying to make you holy. I'm trying to make you more like me. So you don't give in to every desire, right? When you're in the office and you notice the cute guy in the next cubicle, the cute girl in the next cubicle, what's the ethic? No sex. Right? No sex. Not trying to steal your fun, trying to make you more like me, trying to help you live a full life, an abundant life. In love with your wife's best friend. What's the ethic? No sex. If those sound really strange, I'm just telling you things I've dealt with in the last 2 years. I'm just telling you the things that when people call me and they want to talk about the hard stuff of life, and we get to this point and they've given in and they feel really badly about it, or there's guilt, and I'm trying to pull them out of the guilt and the shame section and just say, but don't you understand, this is just about you becoming more like God. It's not about shaming you. It's not about taking away your fun. It's not even about denying the fact that you have desires. It's about giving your life over to Christ, becoming sanctified. I've never seen a person who walked this kind of life that at some point in time it's not disastrous. Here's the bigger dilemma. Sometimes when we walk our lives and we're not dealing with sexuality, what do we deal with? Hidden things. Things that we can protect everybody from knowing a little bit more. The way we eat, the kind of food we eat. Anybody ever get home from work and just grab a bag of chips and go to town? Cheetos at my house don't last. Right? Porn. When you can grab the computer and nobody's around. You think, I'm not hurting anybody. But see, you are. You're hurting yourself first. You're allowing that desire to be the thing that controls your life. And over time, that's going to be disastrous. I summarized it this way. Following our lust does not allow us to live a full life. Following our lust does not allow us to live a full life. So here's the question, church. Where are you submitting your desires to God? Because that's what it means. I mean, if you start a relationship with a young lady, gentlemen, if you think back to when you first started dating, maybe you're not married, but maybe you've dated several times, and you start dating somebody, think about it as the relationship gets more and more serious. What do? You surrender some things, right? At some point in time, I've never met a woman who says it's okay to go out and date 6 other women while you're dating her. It just doesn't work that way. If you know that lady, I probably need to talk to her, okay? But just to offer some counsel. That's all I meant by that. But understand with me that it never works out when we hide these desires, right? So what area do you have that you need to submit that desire, submit that lust, submit that thing that's controlling your life too much so that you can become more sanctified, more like God? Where are you giving those areas of lust in your life over to God this week? Everybody has one. No judgment. No judgment. We want to be the place where we can lock arms, celebrate our brokenness, and then get up and walk on together, right? To experience a full life. Let me pray for us.